It's Metallica on BBC Radio 6 Music, a tune from the most recent album, 72 Seasons, Lux Eterna. And so, it's Marianne Hobbs. This is BBC Radio 6 Music, and today we spend time in the company of Lars Ulrich. He passed by our studios after Metallica returned to Donington for the first time in 10 years for 2 gigs at Download Festival. And we spoke all about the genesis of Metallica, mental health, Stranger Things, and, well, just how you keep it fresh after 42 years. We've called it The Bones of Lars, and you'll hear all about that right after Enter Sandman. This was recorded live at Donington in 1995, Metallica's second encore. Lars Ulrich, it's been such a long time and it's so good to see you. Welcome to BBC Radio 6 Music.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been too long.
Yeah, 20 years, I'm going to say.
Crazy. Crazy.
Tell me about Donington.
So if you go up the M1, a little past Birmingham, wow. We managed to perform our 9th and 10th time up there. I still get sort of intimidated. It has so much rock history and so much of why I wanted to be in a band. If I think back to 1980 and sitting there as a 17-year-old kid trying to figure out what's up, down, or sideways, and going 43 years, this will still be sort of ground zero for all things hard rock in that universe. And the band that I haven't started yet with James will have performed here 10 times. And, hard rock is still a sort of viable and relevant force in the music world, and that we're still part of it. None of that would make any sense. Do you know what I mean? 40 years ago. So it's an emotional experience to be up there for me, and it brings back just a lot of memories. But there was a lot of things that come full circle up on that raceway, and it's pretty crazy cool to still be invited. Thank you, Andy. And it's still pretty crazy cool that anybody shows up and cares about our little rock band from California.
Do you know, it's so interesting that you want to bring it right back to the Genesis point, because I've got something that I wanted to show you today.
Okay, wow.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
So.
Okay, Music Connection.
This is
LA
magazine.
Trade, yes. LA Trade, Music Trade magazine. This is probably 86 or 87.
That's right. It's 37 years old, that copy of Music Connection, and I dug it out of my archives, especially to show you this today.
Shocking success story.
Yeah. If you open up and see your feature, which is just marked right there, you will see that there's a fantastic strapline on the picture that reads, "The band of the hour has learned to make do without lipstick, hot water, airplay, or compromise."
Wow. Yeah. Look at that. Yeah, I recognize these photos and these T-shirts. Look, everybody get their scissors out and cut off the sleeves of their T-shirts. That's the communal hot thing to do at that time. Yeah, we were touring America with Ozzy Osbourne, our first go-around in the arenas. And I believe Master of Puppets had come out that spring. And the type of music that we were making was, connecting with a lot of disenfranchised and misfit kids like ourselves all across America. I don't think the industry at that time and the music scene was so structured and so governed by the sort of the core principal outlook of the record companies at the time, and they had a very specific way that things were being marketed and promoted and so on, and the type of band that we were and the type of things that would fit in under an independent umbrella, an alternative umbrella, or anything that was edgy or outside or was not part of that mainstream type of thing. And then a few bands came along and started making so much noise that the record companies finally go, hang on a second, there's more people, more music fans out there that like their music edgy, that like their music outside of the prefabricated sort of very formulaic way that things were at the time. And I think the late 80s was really sort of a significant shift in the way music was being shared in America and connecting with fans and just like ourselves, loners, misfits, disenfranchised, outsider kids trying to figure it all out. It turned out there were tens of millions of them in America and everywhere else in the world who wanted their music just different, and this was kind of right when that wave was turning. As you can see in some of the copy that you're referring to. I think a significant part of what drives this band is that we still kind of feel like outsiders, and we still kind of feel like we don't really belong anywhere. And so when we show up at Donington again, it's like, oh my God, we're here at ground zero. And I tell my friends we're a little anxious or a little nervous, and they go, well, you're the biggest band in the world. You've headlined here 37 times. And none of that registers at all. It just still feels kind of intimidating and overwhelming. I think when the four of us are in a room together writing songs, making the record that you just held up, 72 seasons or whatever, a lot of those core elements are still kind of at play, and still, we're still just trying to figure it out. And like I say to people, we may even turn professional at some point soon and do this full time, because there's a part of us that still feel like we haven't really earned it yet or whatever. And I think that I guess I would rather have that than feel feel like we're ending up on autopilot or phoning it in or whatever the opposite of that is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because I wanted to ask you if you would talk a little bit about the Underground Tape Exchange, which is kind of what happened at the genesis point of the band, isn't it? People were sharing cassette tapes of your music underground, and it's almost impossible to conceive of that in the digital age that we live in now. But for everybody who, I guess, is listening today who is a younger fan, can you explain a bit how that actually worked at the outset of your career?
Yeah, I think that, the first thing is you just have to close your eyes and you have to, put your phone away and you have to put your 37 other products away and imagine a time where the way we communicate and the way information travels in 2023, that just doesn't exist. And so each country is very autonomous in that sense. Each country, has their own currency, their own music infrastructure. This whole global thing that's happening now doesn't exist. And so whatever's going on in England primarily goes on in England. Whatever's going on in France goes on in France and Germany, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the only way to really communicate with like-minded fans, are through this network of basically pen pals, and through in the back of Sounds of the Enemy or whatever, there'd be like little adverts for mail order, vinyl mail order company out of somewhere in the West Midlands or whatever. I used to write to one called Bullet Records all the time and get all my new wave of British heavy metal stuff sent or whatever. But so the only way to share music, no Spotify, no, Apple Music, no anything, no YouTube. I would get something and then I would want to share it with a friend, and I would, make a cassette of the record and then send it to my friend in Sweden or in Holland or in Denmark or in Italy or whatever. And then he would have a network of 5 or 10 pen pals or whatever. And so that tape trading would kind of get out there, and you would, oh my God, there's a Danish band. They don't have a record deal yet, but they've made some demos. They're called Merciful Fate. And you would get these tapes. You wouldn't know anything about what they look like. Sometimes you didn't even know the song titles. You would just get a cassette sent from your friend, or, something that had been duplicated for the third or the fourth time. You could tell by the poorer the sound quality was, the more often so it's not like today when you digitally copy something and it's perfect, whether it's a picture or music or whatever. Back then, every time you made another copy of a cassette tape, it went down a generation because it was analog. And often you couldn't hear the music that well because of the hiss or whatever, but you could tell there were some crazy riffs or some really cool energies or dynamics happening. some of these tape traders would make their own little fanzines that were often the same size as this magazine that were stapled together from, Xerox copied stuff they had made, on their school typewriter or whatever, and they would write about this band, Merciful Fate, the singer is a guy named King Diamond, blah, 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 and then, they would make 20 copies of their fanzine and send it to their 20 friends or whatever. So that was how you sort of communicated with people. No Instagram, no Twitter, no anything, Facebook. I was living in California. I somehow, with my mom, managed to figure out how to make a subscription to Sounds and would get Sounds sent once a week. It would show up 3-4 weeks late, but it came sort of regularly-ish on a weekly basis, just 3-4 weeks later. And then I would read about, Iron Maiden or Saxon or Diamond Head or the Tigers of Pantang or whatever. And then, you'd find your Bullet Records ads, and I'd send away for an, EP that the journalist at Sounds named Jeff Barton had talked about by a band called, Parallax, or the latest single from Silverwing or something. And then that would show up 2 months later, and then I would make a copy of that for my friend somewhere on a cassette tape, and that's how stuff got around, and we accepted that. And obviously we also felt a bond with these people that we were communicating with. So when we finally met them on the East Coast of the United States or in Europe or whatever, it felt like you were meeting like your best friend, because you had exchanged 9 letters over the past 2 years or whatever. The long gone fine form of letter writing, boys and girls. I don't know if it was better or worse than today. It just was a different time. And I'm glad I got a chance to experience it. And I'm glad that I have, the best of both worlds, and still have the memories of all that, because there was a connection that we all felt that we kind of lived in our own world. And the people that we were close with, we were really close with, and we felt like we were sharing something that was special. And I'm glad that I'll always have those memories.
Yeah, for sure. It feels to me, though, listening to you speak, that kind of degree of passion, that idealism remains almost unchanged from those early days, right?
Are you talking about the younger generation now?
No, I'm talking about you.
Well, for us, yeah, absolutely. It's hard to shed that when you've grown up with it, and I think that we're all, I guess for lack of a better word, products of that time. And like I said, I feel that when we do get in a room together, the four of us, and just play music and write and try to figure it all out, that sort of simplicity still exists, and everything that this band has become, or what people have perceived it to become or to represent, all that doesn't exist in that room when the four of us are just playing music and trying to figure out how to put one foot in front of the other, still 41 years later.
Do you know, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about familiarity as well, as you say, because you've been together for such a long time. So when you enter the studio, when you approach a new record, how do you keep it fresh? How do you find yourself in a situation where you can't immediately second guess where James is going to go?
I think a lot of it's instinct. I mean, every record has a tendency to start off as a reaction to the last record. You can't discount the previous record. So whether you like the previous record, whether you dislike the previous record, whether you like the sonics, whether you dislike the sonics, whether you like the songwriting, whatever your relationship is with where you left off, that's a part of, I think, where you continue. And so this last 72 Seasons record was basically born in these long distance sessions as we're sitting trying to figure out if there's a way to make music basically via Zoom, and then as we got further into 21 and we figured out how to be in the same room and all this stuff, it slowly started taking shape. I've always said that making records is it's really, if you break it down in the most practical sense, and I know this doesn't sound particularly romantic, but it's basically just making thousands of decisions. You know, it's, should it be faster? Should it be slower? Should it be heavier? Should it be lighter? Should there be more bass? Should there be less bass? Should there be, you know, should that be 4 instead of 2? Should it be 8? Should it, you know, be in a different key? Should it be in that key? Should it be, and so every day you're going through this and trying to just follow your instincts and hope that you're making the right decisions, at the same time also allowing yourself to sort of, you know, change it as you go along. But the one thing that I could tell really early on was that there was the word we used a lot to describe it was there was a relentlessness in the music and a lot of sort of energy that seemed to still be present. And I think we were very protective of making sure that wouldn't dissipate as we were going along.
It feels to me like a really lean record, like you've stripped it right back to the kind of bones of Metallica, if you like.
Yeah, if any of that, people say it's a throwback to this, you know, the first single even sounds, you know, Wabam, blah, blah. That's all fine. Any interpretation is appreciated and respected.
I was going to ask you a little bit about that as well. Like, how do you actually arrive at that line in the sand where you think, okay, this is the marker, it's as good as it can ever be at this point?
Most of the conversations, if you could be in the studio with us along the way, is that good? Can it be better? Is it really? Those are the two main questions every day. Is like, is that good? Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Can it be better? Yeah, maybe it could be a little better, and then you try to figure out how you make it, 7% better, and then you try again next week. Can it be better? Should it be 2 there instead of 4? Should that be then? Should it be this? Should blah, blah, blah. And then you go, I don't think it can be better. And then you go, is it good enough? And you go, yeah, it's great. And then you get it out there. So...
Yeah.
Back in the day, how do you know when it's good? It's when it's Friday at 10 p.m. and you have to be out of the studio because somebody else is coming in Saturday morning. That's when you know it's done. But we don't have that problem, for better or worse now, because we have our own studio, so nobody else is coming in. Still, we kind of want to get on with it. At some point, you wake up and you go, can it be any better? And you go, no, it can't. And then you go, well, let's share it with the world.
Metallica with 72 seasons. You're listening to our Metallica special, The Bones of Lars Ulrich, on BBC Radio 6 Music. And here is part 2. The world is a big and beautiful and exquisite place, isn't it? And now you're looking at a whole new generation of fans that have discovered the band through the portal of Stranger Things, a brand new generation. I don't know, that must feel incredibly exciting.
It's very exciting. It's unexpected. So many people have asked me, did you know? No, we didn't know. We didn't know anything. You never know with these things. And we've kind of done a 180 in our band in the last, I don't know when, maybe 3-5 years ago. We would just say no to everything before the question was even asked. So a lot of sync requests and so on, it was just, no, we're not interested in sharing these songs with that. We were very cynical of that whole world. But a few years ago, it was like, why are we like that? And why don't we share the music? And why don't we support other creative endeavors and outlets and younger filmmakers and independent filmmakers and TV shows and now we say yes to pretty much everything. And obviously I knew about Stranger Things from my kids and was aware of the phenomenon, but we didn't know that it was going to be a phenomenon at this level. Nobody would know that. We certainly had heard and was aware of the Kate Bush element. The fact that a 37-year-old heavy metal song that's close to 9 minutes or whatever could connect with a younger generation at the level that it did last summer it's beyond explaining. And I think, if anything, it just reiterates and confirms that you can never really know with the zeitgeist and what's going on sort of in the cultural landscape. So as much as you sit and think that you know the answers or can predict where things are going, you don't. And I like that. I like the fact that, the algorithms may still get it wrong occasionally, or common sense, or whatever you say. And still, we've been out playing shows in Europe now since April. And there are as many younger fans there as there has ever been, if not more. Maybe they don't know that we're in our late 50s. Maybe they don't know that Kirk Hammett has actually already passed the 60 line. Maybe that it was taken out of the bio on the website. I don't know. But it's pretty crazy cool that so many young people continue to show up for a band of our somewhat advanced age, even though we still feel young and spunky and still trying to figure it out. And like I say, may threaten to go professional any day now. It still is kind of crazy that so many young people show up. So we're very grateful for that.
Speaking of Metallica in extraordinary context, I understand you've also got initiatives in America for marching bands who play Metallica's music, right?
There's a whole campaign. Yes, it's we have a great team around us who try to come up with unprecedented ways of connecting the music to an unsuspecting audience out there, and that's one of them. They've been working on that for a while. One of the guys on our team named Mark. And it's exciting. In America, the whole marching band phenomena is closely associated with sports events. And Metallica music ends up being the, I guess for lack of a better word, the battle cry, or has a pretty big presence at sports events in America especially. And we're not limited to America, but the marching band thing and all that is sort of an American phenomenon in that context that we're talking about here. So that's an exciting outlet also.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I just wanted to circle back to, which I feel is really, really important with Metallica, I feel that you were so far ahead of your time addressing mental health issues, especially with the documentary, Some Kind of Monster. And I wondered how you feel about that 20 years later, because I think where we're sitting right now in 2023, it's very much part of a common narrative, isn't it now, among every human being on the planet, and especially in the aftermath of the pandemic. But I wonder how you reflect on that time and what it is that you were actually doing with the band, because I feel that you were possibly the very first artist at your level to actually break that ground publicly.
Well, thank you for saying that. Transparency has always been a really big thing for us, and so we decided very early on that the bands that we appreciated and the bands that we were inspired by, most of them were very transparent. And we wanted to have the connecting door to the fans, be as open wide as possible. I think if you decide to open the door, the only thing you can do is open the door completely. You can't cherry pick when to let people in. It's got to be the good and the bad, and it's got to be all of it. And there's got to be continuous access. So we feel that we've always tried to honor that. And that movie that you're talking about from 20 years ago was obviously, I think, for a lot of people that never had that kind of open door access to a rock and roll band, and seeing all of it, including the warts and all the crazy that was going on behind the doors as we were trying to figure out who we were and trying to figure our way through understanding the growth that had occurred, but who we were as people and how we related to each other, and the state of our minds and our own mental health and all of it. And at that time, obviously, there were all these camera crews there, and we just decided to go for it because we weren't scared, and we trusted the film people, and we felt that kind of transparency was part of who we were. So close, no matter how far. the younger generation now, mental health, and I think circling back to where we were earlier, talking about how information and certainly social media impacts the way we communicate now. Everyone is way more transparent about how they're feeling and how they're doing and what's going on, good and bad, in the way the world communicates with itself and how everybody communicates with each other nowadays. So I'm not going to sit here and pat ourselves on the back. I mean, it certainly wasn't a conscious thing. Let's try to get this type of thing out there so we can be considered pioneers in any of that. We, like most of the time, don't really know what we're doing. We're kind of punting it. The initial reaction from the music world was, we're seeing way too much. This is way too intimate. But there were a lot of people in the film world that really related to the dramatic arc in the movie that came kind of naturally out of what was happening in our lives. And then in the medical world, we started getting all these requests from doctors and mental health professionals and so on who wanted to show the film at conferences and seminars and all this, which was obviously completely unexpected. So it felt like it connected with many different people, but maybe least with people in the music world, because they were almost shocked or borderline offended by the fact that it was so transparent. We shouldn't see that kind of stuff from a rock and roll band, trying to figure it out or whatever. But I am proud of the fact that we had enough faith in ourselves and the filmmakers to go forward with it, and I'm proud that it's part of who we are. It's a very long time ago, and so when people bring up the film now, I try to go to great lengths to sort of explain that what you're seeing in that movie is over 20 years ago, and the internal dynamic and temperature in the band is very different now. But I am proud of the fact that with this new record, 72 Seasons talks so much about our journey and who we are, and everything about this record is, we're not trying to play down or hide our age or how we're aging. And I think that it's a significant part of who we are. And so talking about, the first 18 years of your life, which is the 72 seasons, and how that in some way shapes who you become later. I think they're all really, really interesting topics. If nothing else, just a conversation starter for everybody, to encourage everybody to be open with each other and to be honest with each other and with themselves about the state of their particular world and their day-to-day issues or whatever. So I am grateful for the fact that people are relating to that side of this record and where we're at right now. And it's certainly a conversation that, if nothing else, is long overdue.
Lars, thank you so much for being with us. It's such a joy to spend some time with you.
Right back at you. Thank you.
It's Metallica on BBC Radio 6 Music. Too Far Gone is the name of the tune, lifted from the most recent album, 72 Seasons. Could potentially be the next single, so we hear. A little bird tells us. So I want to shout out all the Metallica fans who've come together to share this moment on the radio, locked right around the world. It's so good to see you all on social media. I want to shout out Leonie and Yvonne, Katja and Hans, Peter Mawson, who's listening on the farm today, and a big shout out to Mr. Booth, who says, immersed in Never Never Land, Marianne. Let me see, I have messages coming in from all over the place. I want to say hello to Keith Murray, who says, such an incredible interview. Metallica gave me the confidence to feel like I belonged in my teenage years, and they're forever a band that I love, more and more so as the years go on. And a shout out too to our listener who says, I saw Metallica, I was there at Donington in 1995. It was my first ever gig, and the experience changed my life at the age of 15.